Item: SCP-666. Object Class: Euclid. Special Containment Procedures: SCP-666 is to be stored in a monitored, closed vault at all times at Site-73 in the Tibetan Mountains. Guards are to be changed weekly, must pass a background check before being assigned to their post, and proven free of drug and alcohol addiction. SCP-666 is to be entered only by D-Class personnel in approved testing procedures or by approved Foundation researchers with Level 4 or higher security clearance. Non-D-Class personnel who enter SCP-666, whether or not they have revealed a prior history of addiction, must be observed by a guard at all times. If they show any sign of being affected by SCP-666, they are to be removed immediately. Description: SCP-666 is a medium-sized Tibetan yurt, made of tied wooden branches and covered in yak leather. The interior ceiling is 2.44 meters, 8 ft, high and the base of the yurt is 9.14 meters, 30 ft. The hut is circular in shape. The interior of the yurt has a dirt floor and appears to be as crude as the outside to the majority of observers. The branches that make up the yurt frame are wrapped in rabbit fur and tied with yak leather thongs. Periodically, SCP-666 will change its location within the confinement area. This will happen only when not under direct observation, but remote viewing gives the impression of an entity inside the structure lifting it wholly and moving to its new position. To date, it has not made any attempt to escape confinement. SCP-666 was discovered in 1973 by SCP operatives searching the mountain regions on reports of several missing persons having returned from the area giving similar explanations, seeking shelter during harsh weather. The individuals would happen upon SCP-666 by seeming happenstance. Having gone out in similar conditions, the exploration team was also able to discover the yurt. Of the 3 operatives present, 2 experienced no ill effects. The third entered a stupor, experiencing vivid hallucinations and muttering incoherently to himself. Upon retrieval of the team, the yurt was recovered and taken to nearby Site-73 for further investigation. When an individual with no history of significant addictions enters the yurt remains dormant and seems to have no ill effects. Class D personnel without a history of alcohol or narcotics abuse were able to sit inside the yurt for days at a time if provided proper nourishment, and did report a greater intensity in their dreams. Individuals who have a history of substance abuse, however, will experience a hallucinogenic effect when inside the structure. In all instances, the subjects report being in a location either from their memories or a corollary thereof, specifically a spot where their addiction was at its most intense. Thus far, there have been reports of a nightclub bathroom, a 1973 Volkswagen Vanagon, a filthy alleyway, the redacted casino in Las Vegas, etc. One subject reported finding himself in a dirty apartment with a prostitute named Chloe with whom he frequently indulged in narcotics abuse. Another reported being in his own bedroom with a computer setup significantly more intricate than he owned before his arrest for distribution of child pornography. During these hallucinations, subjects report that they are confronted by an individual, referred to as SCP-666-1. Descriptions of SCP-666-1 vary widely from person to person, with no commonality to race, gender, or appearance beyond being typical for the surroundings. SCP-666-1 will indulge the subject in their personal addiction, although, at the start, it will have a passive-aggressive attitude. As time progresses, the subject is encouraged to indulge further while simultaneously being encouraged to stop. Should the subject show remorse or a strong desire to give up their addiction, SCP-666-1 will slowly adopt a more genuinely friendly tone and continue the temptation with discouragement hallucinations. Approximately 94% of subjects who have gone through this form of hallucination to their end have been diagnosed as having a near-complete removal of psychological addictions, though physical symptoms will persist through a natural withdrawal cycle. If the subject gives into SCP-666-1's temptations, the entity becomes increasingly hostile. There is no set timetable nor degree of indulgence, but if left unchecked, SCP-666-1 will invariably begin assaulting the subject and forcing the subject's vice upon them to levels of extreme overdose. If the subject is not forcibly removed from SCP-666 during this period, they will die. Cause of death is typical of their addiction, whereby an alcoholic will suffer extreme kidney or liver failure, a cocaine user will develop cardiac dysrhythmia, a subject addicted to video games or television will suffer extreme muscle atrophy and health issues associated with a sedentary lifestyle, etc. To date, there has been no clear connection between who will and will not succumb to SCP-666-1. The working hypothesis is that it is simply a matter of the individual's willpower and conviction. All attempts to interview SCP-666-1 directly have failed, with the entity either redirecting the conversation or bluntly refusing to answer. The only statement that reveals anything to its nature was a single instance of "we're not important here. This is all about you." This indicates that there are either multiple entities attached to SCP-666, or there are additional instances of SCP-666 in the world. Investigation is ongoing as to whether similar stories have arisen. Should another instance of SCP-666 be discovered, it is to be transferred immediately to Site-73.